Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Friday webinar. And welcome to my guest, Melisse Gelula. And I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a couple of minutes, and we'll begin our discussion. Right now, we start, as we usually do, with a couple minutes of slow, deep, soft belly breathing. Melisse and I have been rushing from meeting to meeting virtually all morning and then up till a few minutes ago. So it's good for us, and we hope good for you, just to sit comfortably and relax and breathe deeply. I like to begin these sessions with this simple concentrative meditation, focusing on the breath coming in through the nose and out through the mouth, with our bellies soft and relaxed. Perhaps focusing, concentrating on the word soft as we breathe in and belly as we breathe out. Relaxing with each exhalation. If thoughts come, let them come, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. Couple more slow, deep breaths. Okay, let's open our eyes, bring our attention back into the room. I found myself smiling as I was doing the breathing. I was thinking about you, Melisse, and just enjoying this dance. You've been working with us now for the last couple of months, and it's been a wonderful experience. So I'm very glad to have you on this webinar and to share you with our audience, and for for everyone to get a chance to sort of sit in on our conversation as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
In 2009, Melisse co-founded Well+Good with the intention of demystifying and democratizing wellness. It's since grown into a global platform with 15 to 20 million unique visitors each month. And in addition to being an entrepreneur, Melisse is I like the steadfast advocate for mental health. That means you want us to be mentally healthy. Is that correct? Yeah.
Hardly, yes.
And since the onset of COVID-19, she's focused much of her attention on helping people discover new ways to enhance their health and sanity and to bring communities together. And a significant piece of that work has been here with us at the Center for Mind Body Medicine, helping us to sort of sharpen up and focus and extend our communication. So and as I said a moment ago, it's been great to have you working with us. So welcome, Melisse. And let me begin by asking, who are you? And give you a chance to share who you are with me. I know a little bit for sure, and with our audience as well.
Great. Well, thanks for today. It's amazing to be able to do this with you, Jim. Your work and the organization that you founded means so much to me. And I'm really eager to just sort of share my excitement with other people too. I've long been a mental health advocate, and I think it might be surprising for a lot of people to hear that who know me through Well and Good and wellness and media. And although Well and Good was never founded to be a mental health or wellness platform, it was meant to be a wellness lifestyle site. There's parts of me very much in the DNA, as well as my co-founders, and I'd say my part was largely on how to bring more wellness to more people in a lifestyle way. So in 2009, it was really when we started seeing things happen, like yoga studios everywhere, spinning studios everywhere, Whole Foods everywhere. There were all these elements of how we think about a contemporary consumerist wellness lifestyle that were popping up, and nobody was really reporting on it. My co-founder and I had come through, got a really good boot camp in health and wellness through being journalists. So we met at a spa and travel lifestyle magazine. Both of us traveled significantly to a lot of the places around the world where a lot of our holistic practices come from, and learned about them in the traditions often, or with experts very much linked to those traditions. So we came up through health and wellness through journalism, and I loved journalism as a tool to really bring it to more people and to vet wellness for more people too. So at the time, media was very confused about wellness, and the New York Times or even New York Magazine would report very cynically or almost mockingly on what was going on. I'm sure you faced a lot of this in mind body medicine as well. Yeah, there's so many parallels and skepticism. So you had that on one end, and then you had the everything's going to save your soul kind of content in those free magazines you would get at the health food store. And so I really believed, as did my co-founder, that it wasn't, it was a huge opportunity for us to use journalism as a way for bringing more wellness to more people by reporting on what was happening very much in New York City, and then quickly realizing a lot of our visitors to the website were coming from all over the country. So wellness really started to blossom. We reported on so many of those nascent businesses and experts, and that has been the joy of my life, that kind of work. And so coming to the work, though, I had my own, interests. I had been a journalist for a while, but I'd also been in psychoanalytic training to be a psychoanalyst, a therapist. So that was a big part of my world for about 6 years. My first job out of college with an English degree was actually working in a crisis intervention setting in a rape crisis and domestic violence center, where I did education work and I did group counseling and one-on-one counseling. So for me, it's interesting to sort of thread through the various jumping around the lily pads. For me, like it's been very important. So mental health to wellness, mental health again. It's all very connected. And sometimes people will ask me, how do I show up in media as a blogger, or how do I build a platform as a wellness expert? And I think, oh my gosh, I could not tell you how to do this with a straight line, because that was not my path. I just sort of followed my heart and my purpose and what I wanted to see more of in the world.
So what do you think, what I was struck by when I met you, like, I guess a year and a half ago, something like that. How did you attract so many people to Well and Good? Well, what do you think was interesting, special about what you had to offer? Because clearly people keep coming back. What's going on, you think?
I think one of the things was seeing the white space early on, right? Because like I said, if the major news outlets weren't covering wellness and we were smacking our forehead as to saying why, we were the ones to to catalyze that movement. And doing so really journalistically with super high integrity content makes a big difference, right? Because there's just a lot of
what do you mean when you say super high integrity as opposed to super low cynicism? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, paying journalists to become experts on a beat that had been considered fluffy before that, right? So there was this whole problem of sending editorial assistants to like review things or experience things and publish about them with no context whatsoever. We would never do that even with dining or theater criticism. We would never send somebody without that context. So we really built our team up as experts so they could be trustworthy. And we also dispensed with a lot of things we were seeing in women's magazines that made women feel terrible about themselves. So many women's magazines are framed around a sense of lack or insufficiency, that you must change your body or change your behaviors to be loved or have a romantic partner or have flat abs. And here are the ways to get them. And a lot of that didn't seem like wellness to me. That seemed like a weight loss Bible that had been like veiled with the language of wellness. So I think there were a lot of people who are ready to also bring together that kind of sense that that's like not quite me. I can't meet that ideal with how they wanted to live. So we had Yoga Journal, we had the Vegetarian Times. So by bringing all of that together in a 360 lifestyle, I think that really meant something to people.
Can you give people who are watching us a sense of a shift from an approach that you're describing, which is perhaps a bit harsh, perhaps a bit judgmental, and unfortunately fostering people's negative self-judgments? How did you shift that around? Can you give an example of a way you're approaching, whether it's weight loss or sort of relationships or whatever, how you've changed it and moved it into with another kind of frame and another kind of spirit?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things was that we had a style guide that we used internally that had a lot of no words and phrases. So some of those were bikini body. We never used that phrase. And about 5 years into it, of the other women's magazines looking around and trying to sort of sniff out, I think, what made us different, what was different about our ethos, that became a big one that a lot of women's magazines jumped on and waved their flag about, which they should have. And they refrained from using that phrase too. That was a really important sea change, because getting a bikini body was supposed to be the motivation for eating well, or your fitness instructor at one time would tell you that was your motivation for working hard in class. So we took that out as motivation, that you're here for maybe the 1 hour of your day that you get for you. It's part of your self-care. It's part of, your to-do list fades away when you're on a spin bike, it's all of these other reasons that we show up for ourselves, not for
So shifting away from a purely goal-directed approach, in which you succeed or fail, to an approach in which you appreciate your experience. That's part of what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's also free of a lot of cultural pressures that I think media was putting on women. We could call it anti-feminist, or we could just say that this is so embedded in our culture we don't even notice when it's happening. So it doesn't need to be a part of wellness. Wellness is like the best stuff of the day, not that, you don't have the right body on this planet. Like, that's not what wellness is about.
So what kind of body do we have? What kind of body? How do we relate to our bodies? What kind of guidance do you give in that sense? Just to give an example.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's really not even about giving advice. It's just a sort of reporting on the culture of wellness, right? Talking about what other people believe or publish about, or what an experience at a gym is like that you might want to check out. So it's not necessarily prescriptive in that way. I think the kinds of bodies that people want to have are a healthy relationship to that body where they're not at war with it. And I'm sure you know a lot about that with your background too. Exactly. So how do we bring that so far out of the dynamic of wellness that it's not a part of that? We're not proselytizing that part of it at all.
One thing about this whole wellness world is that it is often painted or caricatured as, well, this is for something for rich white ladies who got plenty of time. I know that's a point of view and that's a perspective that you have struggled against and tried to expand. Can you say a little bit about how you are both at Well and Good and now this whole notion of, which I am very much in sync with, of democratizing wellness? How do we take it from a word that just feels like it's still a niche, even if a more respectable niche, to something that's appropriate to everyone?
Yeah, there's a lot happening in that space right now with the word being reclaimed, wellness being a word that's reclaimed from that space that it's just for wealthy white women. And I think part of that has to do with the COVID pandemic. It doesn't look like $108 leggings. It doesn't look like how many boutique fitness classes can I cram into my schedule in a week. And it never really was about that. I see very much how those kinds of things became like a metaphor for what wellness is, for sure. But it was really never about all of that. And I guess I also just want to say that although I've left my company, my heart is still very much there, and it's being carried forward by so many voices. And I think that's what's really important in wellness too. So there's always been many voices in what wellness means to people. And sometimes it's about giving the microphone where it needs to be given. Right. And having more perspectives and more stories and more lives, removing barriers of sexism and racism so that we can really allow people to tell their stories, share their knowledge, whether they're traditional wisdom or very contemporary and modern, breathwork practitioners. There's so much more that we can do to bring people to the center of the discussion where they've been marginalized for a really long time. So doing the democratizing work has been really important to me. I mean, I grew up with a lot of ideas of things I wanted access to that I did not have. And more information for me around my wellness maybe came from things I wanted for my mental health. And so I feel like—
Can you say something about that? What do you mean? How so for you?
I think, I don't know, self-help stuff kind of took a while to reach me. I don't know if that's because I was a kid in the 70s when it was just really starting to take off in a big way. I don't know. I missed the big boom of the 60s, Jim. But it was in college that I really started realizing that there were all these other theories about how to think, how to feel, how to communicate. I needed that in my life. I think a lot of people don't get that at home. They don't get that in school. Where do we get skills for understanding ourselves deeply and having a good relationship with ourselves, knowing we're okay? All of that was really, that was always really important to me.
So, as you're speaking, what I'm sort of hearing and seeing even more clearly is why you might have gotten interested in the Center for Mind-Body Medicine and in our work. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about what attracted you to, why did you come take that first meeting with me a year and a half ago, and what's continued to intrigue you about the Center for Mind-Body Medicine so that you're working with us and you're helping us and bringing your whole self to it. What's going on?
Yeah, well, I only want to bring my whole self to this, Jim. I think that's I'm really, really lucky to be able to do that. But I believe that a backpack of purpose, of personal mission that aligns with my work is what I really want to do right now, and what I'm feel very fortunate to be able to do. So yeah, I think there is a very different, specific personal driver for me. So meeting you originally was like, as a journalist, I've had wonderful opportunities to meet thought leaders in the health and wellness space, been able to interview them or moderate a panel. I was really looking forward to you because I actually felt like this country, like I was like, where are our mental health thought leaders? I need to know who they are. I knew who our nutrition gurus were. I was like, and then I heard about you, and so I was very eager to meet with you and learn more about not just the work that you've published, the strength of the program that you've developed, and the international foothold that you have in trauma healing work. I think is very interesting to me too. So I mentioned earlier I'd had this job in crisis intervention, and the statistics we were given there were staggering to use. That 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime. That made me really wake up to the fact that this is not something rare and outside of everyday life. This is something that's happening to so many people. And so when I read more about your work and that you'd redefined trauma in exactly that way, you said trauma is a part of the human experience. I hadn't heard anybody say that before. So for me, it was like, okay, great. Now what do we do about this? Because this is pervasive. This can be absolutely hobbling. This can bring us to our knees. This can end our hope, our potential. And so what do we do? What's out there? And so seeing how you and the center have worked in Gaza, in Kosovo, South Sudan, after natural disasters, whether it's the wildfires of Sonoma, it just made me feel like I needed to get to know you and your work and the team, your amazing team and faculty, so much better. So I feel like that's what kind of led me in.
One of the things that I appreciated most and continue to appreciate is your openness to experience. And I think this is a message that I want to convey to all of you who are watching, is that you're kind of a model or an example of somebody who gets interested and says, okay, let me experience what's going on. There's a kind of little aphorism that comes from India. You cannot taste the honey by licking the outside of the jar. You gotta take a spoon and take some honey.
Yeah.
So you're willing to do that. What makes you the kind of person who's willing to jump in, who's willing to explore on yourself in an online group that we did, and then in I think a 5-day training that you completely immersed yourself in?
Yeah, I love a 5-day training, Jim. I mean, I've done a lot of different 5-day trainings over my life. I feel like, no, I think I'm a seeker. I always want to know myself better, to have a spiritual connection, I think, to for myself, but to other people. And I don't really talk about it like that in my day to day, but I think that's how I think about it. I think my openness has been, frankly, self-serving to start with. I had stuff that I wanted to make sure that, like, I wanted to save myself. I'll put it that way. I wanted to save myself first. This was my oxygen mask. I had a rough childhood. I think a lot of people can relate to that. My mom had a mental illness. I feel like that is something that we're all talking about much more openly now. And, maybe I didn't 10 years ago when we were starting Well and Good, because I never wanted Well and Good to just be about me and my needs and my childhood. But I do think that it's really important for people and leaders, especially, to bring their whole selves to work and not pretend that we can be these compartmentalized robots. So I don't think that's gotten us very far. It's not very real and not very interesting to me either. So I started to hear a lot of yogis, and I worked with a coach who talked about spiritual bypassing. And I hadn't really heard that phrase before. But I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, of sort of like reading a book about something and feeling like it's done and taken care of. So like reading a book about depression rather than going to therapy, reading a book about or a meme about anxiety rather than dealing with your anxiety. I never wanted to just bypass that stuff because frankly, I was concerned it would come back. And I just believed in the power of like deep work. And I still do. So that's what drove me, I think, to psychoanalysis too.
And what was the training program like for you coming into it?
Um, I gosh, I think, well, first of all, a lot of my friends who know me as a feminist were surprised. They were like, "You went to a Freudian institute. Like, what were you doing?" You know, but there were a lot of modern Freudians and people who had rewritten Freud and evolved Freud who were there too. But for me, I really wanted to go right back to the canon, you know, right back to the origins and work forward. I think that's very much my method, you know, just start at the start. Don't start at level 3 or level 10, just start at the start and work forward. So, yeah, for me, it was really amazing to be in a community of people who valued deep therapeutic work. Like that was fascinating. And the reading was very intense and academic. And I loved that too. I could really geek out on that. I got to write academic papers again. I got to see patients under supervision. And, that was a really important time in my life. I think that it gave me a lot of skills for being a manager down the road too. Trying to empower people, trying to see them as people struggling maybe sometimes in their career, not just somebody at a desk hitting a keyboard, and like seeing multi-dimensional aspects of being a manager and a leader.
So when you came to the Center for Mind-Body Medicine training, after a lot of training, a lot of education, including psychoanalytic training and other therapeutic trainings, what was particularly engaging, interesting, important to you about our training?
Well, I've only had 5 days, so I can't speak to the entirety of the experience. But I think for me, one of the things that stood out was so I got to be in your group, and in your group, you shared with the rest of us too. So if we did a creative drawing, you did a creative drawing. If we did an activity, you did an activity, and you brought yourself to it. For me, that was very different than a psychoanalytic model where you're a neutral person in a chair. And there's some psychoanalysts who like don't crack a smile. Like that was never going to be me, and I never tried to be that person. I felt like I could be a warm psychoanalyst if I, and that was my tactic. But I really liked. So what that conveys to me is a humility. And it is a kind of engagement, not as necessarily a teacher or somebody who knows better, but a facilitator of your own journey, right? So someone who brings you the tools and believes in you that you have the strength to use those tools and get to a new place. So I really liked that element. And we were in a group. And I think that the group space is something that the Center for Mind-Body Medicine really owns as a tool for connection and transformation. I think it's something that we're going to be seeing from all parts of our culture talking about more. There's something about the impact that groups can have when we let our barriers down, when we can share with one another. Some of the dehumanizing things that we go through in a politically fraught time like we're in right now, or through social media, I think it solves for some of that by putting us in connection with people, people who might not be from our walks of life at all.
Yeah, for me, I mean, the group is the way societies aboriginally from the beginning came together when an individual was having a difficult time. The healers would bring together a group, could be immediate family, extended family, or the whole community for healing. So this is in our DNA, and I'm so glad that it was powerful for you, and it is for so many people. I just want to, at this point, say to our viewers, if you're interested in our online groups, we have online groups, and we have a total sliding scale. So whatever your financial status is, we'll find a way for you to be able to join. What I'm struck by again and again as I do these groups in these last months is how intimate the screen can be. I've been doing these groups for 30 years or more in person, but on the screen, it still works. And that's quite amazing to me. And as I'm looking at you now, I'm remembering seeing you on the screen as one of our group members. And just the other thing that's so interesting is by virtue of being able to do this virtually, we're able to bring people from all over, not only the country, but around the world, and so many different kinds of people, and people who don't have much money, as well as people who have some disposable income, to be able to bring them together in online groups as well as online trainings.
Mm-hmm. And
I wanted to come back. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question about the groups? Because this is something that I'd wondered about before, and I wonder how you explain, why it still does work digitally, because there's no doubt to me, having been in the experience, that when, but I was questioning, oh my gosh, if I do this, just digitally, am I going to get as much out of it? Is it going to work? Why do you think it does? Because I felt like it did, but.
Well, we're looking at each other. We're here. There's a limitation and a kind of physical constriction with being focused on the screen. But at the same time, we're looking at each other. We're looking in each other's eyes. We're there with each other. And I think for some people, it's actually easier to do this virtually because they may be shy, and they may have, it just may be uncomfortable to be physically close to other people. So I've been really quite struck by people who sometimes begin these groups very reluctant. Sometimes they have a hard time turning on the screen. We see an icon for the first group and invite them. No, let's see you. Let's come back on. And we're just there. We're there with each other. And there's such a need. This is in human DNA, the need to connect with other people and the need to connect with groups. This goes back to earliest, as far as we can tell, earliest human history. And we've neglected it. We were talking a little bit about that earlier, you and I, in a meeting earlier today, about, we've gotten focused on this medical model, and we've gotten focused on a somewhat authoritarian, patriarchal model. There's the person here who's giving the commandments there, or who is going to do something to you or for you. And we're saying, yeah, that's necessary sometimes, but let's honor and respect this other tradition. In traditional societies, whenever anybody had a minor problem, they went to their granny, their grandmother or somebody else's grandmother, and she knew the basic first aid, physical, psychological, spiritual, social. If you had a major problem, you went to the official healer, whatever that person's name was, shaman, curandero, sangoma, a wise woman, whatever it was, witch doctor. And that person, in addition to knowing the whole pharmacopoeia and all the rituals of the society, would bring together people for the healing. That was just understood. And we're recovering that. We've gone so far in the direction of focusing on individual and that one-on-one interaction, which is beautiful. I mean, you mentioned psychoanalysis. It's a beautiful kind of process, but it's only one kind of process. It's only part of the larger picture. So we're now reclaiming it. And people, I think what's happening is it's not a shock of recognition so much. It's a deep breath of recognition that even at first we're uncomfortable because we're not used to being in groups where we actually share what's going on with ourselves.
That's right.
But once we get over that, once we see that, well, she did it or he did it or that person did it, and we start feeling comfortable, everything changes. And so by the end of a group in our training programs, it's 8 2-hour groups. By the third or fourth day of the training program, people are feeling so much more open and so much more connected. And it's just, we're built for that as human beings, and we're nurturing that part of ourselves.
Yeah. And I've also been really, frustrated as somebody who's, I'm like the worried well in a lot of ways, and I, have had insurance at times in my life, so like I still find it very hard to avail myself of good, like mental health stuff. So like, in other words, if the people with the most access and resources still have a hard time getting it,
We have a harder time.
exactly.
When I first started the center 30 years ago, we were doing all kinds of groups in the Washington area. The first year we had 30 people who were part of the program. We wanted 12 because we wanted enough people to lead groups, but 30 people came for a year-long training program. The easiest people to work with were the people with life-threatening illnesses, with cancer, with HIV. At that point, it was very much life-threatening, with serious heart disease. It was easy to work with people who had been tortured in other countries, people who were seriously traumatized here by violence and poverty. The hardest people to work with were the Washington lawyers and the doctors and the bureaucrats and the people with some authority. It was so much more difficult for them to let go perhaps especially but not only in Washington, D.C., where everybody is worried about what's next and who should I be talking to and am I important enough and am I doing enough? So it's a little more difficult to sort of create an opportunity, and for people who are so goal-directed to allow themselves to be in that position and to be able to be vulnerable, to talk about what's actually going on, as opposed to propagating the image that's going to move them ahead. So it is more challenging. It's not surprising.
Yeah. And then, but it's sort of at the end of the day, what matters is that we all feel okay, and how do we make sure everybody has access to this? So we know the system out there is broken in so many ways. So how do we make sure that everybody has this as a resource? I mean,
that's what we're up to now. That's what we're working on at the center. Is we're working to sort of make our work as widely available as possible with a national program to heal the current trauma that we're going through. We'll talk more about that another time. I wanted to focus on something you said earlier that I think is really important for our viewers. You said that something like that it's, people wonder, is it self-indulgent to take care of myself? And what does that have to do with life in the larger world? And one of the things that I wanted to suggest and wanted to get your thoughts about is that what you're an example of is somebody who has focused on her own wellness, on her own mental health, on her own sort of psychological and spiritual growth and evolution, who is also taking this experience and this message back out into the wider world. And I wonder what you have to say about that to people who may not be necessarily working in the wellness realm, but people who are doing other kinds of entrepreneurial or organizational work in the world. You've had a lot of experience with going in and also with bringing it out. So what are your thoughts about that?
So I love the question. It's a hard one for me to answer because I think part of it has to do with how I'm inclined. Like I needed that oxygen mask that they say, you should put on first before helping others. I think a lot of people skip the oxygen mask for themselves and just go straight to helping others. Like, here's the textbook, I'm going to implement it. Or here's the, I don't know, maybe they're a yoga teacher and here's the practice when they haven't done enough of their own work. I don't know. I just felt like I was surrounded by this need personally to get in and do the work myself, for myself first, that I was accountable to myself, that I needed to know myself, that and that nobody else could do that for me. So I think a lot of women, we're raised to kind of look externally for a lot of things. A lot of endorsement of our intelligence, our looks, whatever it is. And I don't know, I really needed to know that I could do this myself. And that's like, I'm a Capricorn, I'm kind of type A. It's how I relate to the world. So I can't really be prescriptive because, people will find their own way there. But I think how more and more people find it is through a crisis or a wellness wake-up call, which is the other side of it, right? It's like you're in a state of crisis or something happens in your life that switches on the inclination to learn more. For some people, it's COVID, right? It's like really needing more immediately and making it be very like Maslowian, like the basic needs of my life have changed and I need to make sure they're met, and I think the mental health piece for people has been, and this is going to be a pandemic that lives on beyond the vaccine, right? What this year has done to people, the loss, the worry, the instability, the lack of connection. So I think people are having a lot of people are having their moment now. And so we're going to see it in mass ways.
Well, one of my observations about you is, and I believe that one of the sort of the virtues, the blessings of your having taken time to go inside is that you really trust your own decision making. And that you take your time and that you're willing to change your mind. And I've seen this in our relationship. You thought one thing at first, and you thought another thing, then you thought another. And then as you came to what really made sense for you and made sense for the Center for Mind Body Medicine. And to me, this is a message that I think that you can help perhaps many of our viewers and people generally with learning, who are not perhaps in the wellness space or field as a profession, but who can use the tools to help them in the rest of their lives, that you have managed to tune into what's really important for you and to trust your understanding and your intuition as you make decisions. And in this case, it's a decision about a partnership, a business, a next step in your life. I don't know if I want to say I appreciate that. I wonder if there's more that you want to say about that right now, ways you could help people, because I think that's a real contribution that you have. And I think it sounds like that's been in the spirit of Well and Good from the beginning.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that, this is something that's incredibly worth cultivating, right? We're not on a planet of one. We share the planet with billions of people. It's kind of up to us to figure out how we live in connection with them, right? And so for me, I certainly have strong ideas and opinions. My parents will tell you that, I have, so would my co-founders, so would my, former employees. It's like, I have a vision for things, but I also have an openness. Like I really am a seeker and I'm a learner, and I really try to be a listener because I really want to metabolize what's happening sort of outside with what's going on for me inside. Meaning those things kind of have a beautiful alchemy that come together for like the right answer or the right action or the right action now. And to be honest, like it took me a long time to get there because I was afraid of making a mistake, or I was afraid of being not thorough enough in my thinking. So I had to, make a position with like it had to be absolutely unimpeachable to be heard in a room, and I feel like, no, actually what's more welcome is when people can say, you know what, I've evolved my thinking in this, or you know what you said now makes a world of difference to how I was thinking about this. And now I'm thinking blah, 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 blah. So I really honor that as a process it's a fulfilling process for me. And it's one I use in connection and in leadership.
So is there any guidance that you have or any specific techniques? The way I use soft belly breathing to balance myself and help others balance themselves biologically and physiologically, psychologically. I'm wondering if there's any thoughts you have about how to help other people come to this place where they're trusting that inner voice, they're trusting the judgment a little bit more.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like a book, or I don't know, something that I might need a little time to answer, but I think that sometimes we feel it in our bodies as a knee-jerk response, like something very fast. This is your gut saying yes or no, or like that's not right. You've got me wrong. Don't misrepresent me. For me, there's almost something, yeah, I have to pay attention to the little knee-jerk part that happens internally, whether it's like visceral or intellectual, because there's something there that's a bit of a cue, and not to fight it and shove it, in another room and lean up against the door so it can't come out and be a part of the conversation, which I think we all love to do that with difficult things sometimes. But for me, it's really, trying to be in the same room with that and figure out what's going on. Why do I feel that way? What do I need from this? Maybe I don't know right now. I need to say, you know what? I don't know right now. Like, can we come back to this? And I'm not 100% there is the other thing. Like, this is very much still work in progress on that. And I think we all need to give ourselves permission around that work in progress part too, because this is hard wiring. We're recoding all the time.
Good. Hopefully, we're all always works in progress. But I really like what you're saying. Tuning into what your immediate response, your physical response, considering it, questioning it, and then the other thing you said is maybe I'm not ready to give the answer yet, which is great. I think that so many people, so many feel I have to know it right now. I have to do it right now, and
Yeah.
to say I need some time. It's beautiful, simple, but very beautiful and important.
Thank you. Well, I would have to say my preference is to know it right freaking now. I'm not going to deny that. That is my preference. My head would love that, but like my gut and some other part of my intuition is like, we're not ready. Not ready.
Yeah, and I find sometimes my initial reaction is a reaction. It's like fight or flight.
Yeah.
And then I have to say, let me breathe deeply and let me see if this is really the only space I can be in, or if there's a little more amplitude around me that I can feel and explore.
Yeah.
I want to ask one or two of the questions we've been touching on some of the questions that have come in from viewers. But I want to focus on a couple of these. Sometimes the wellness world feels distant from my life. This is a question. How can I make wellness accessible and personal to me? What's your response to that?
Oh, wow. That's an amazing question. So first of all, like, you get to define what wellness is for you. It doesn't have to be anybody else's definition. There are things that are probably repeated in your life that in your day, you're brushing your teeth. What is it you're thinking about when you're looking in the mirror? Is it rushing to your to-do list or your worry list? Or is it taking a moment for yourself to like honor yourself, to empower yourself? So that's like the smallest example, because you get to decide, how it shows up. For me, it was like the joy in learning how to make a kale salad. This thing that had been like the garnish on the side of a plate at a restaurant became like the center of my plate. And that for me was like, this is like this dark leafy green experience that like, it was like kale was this portal into a wellness way of eating for me. So I don't know. I feel like you get to decide how it shows up, but I think tethering it to joy is really important, not out of insufficiency or punishing, just tethering it to joy for you. So if it's like dancing to, a song in your living room, like with abandon, or, I think it's things like that where I think wellness counts as all of that.
Beautiful. So it's bringing appreciation, mindfulness, joy to ordinary activities. That wellness comes out of doing that. It's both very simple and very deep at the same time. If we can do that, my God, then everything changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What are some of your favorite ways that you strengthen your mental health? What are practices that we can engage with daily? This is another question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I say this as somebody who at one time spent a lot of money on psychoanalysis several days a week. You actually don't always have to do that. There are so many backed, free ways of like bolstering your mental health and like sparking that joy for yourself. So some of my favorite ways have to do with nature. So it's like going out into my backyard and walking the dog, or actually incredibly sacred parts of my day for me. I used to joke that when on weekends, when I could just sit and stare out the window at the trees, that was kind of my meditation, like just staring at trees. And now there's a lot of talk about like forest bathing. It's hiking, just allowing yourself to kind of have the thoughts that you have when you're walking in the woods, and breathing in I think they're called anthocyanins, the molecules that are released from plants and trees, that cleanses the air. It's for me, like, that's a really beautiful one. My meditation practice comes and goes. Sometimes I'm really into it. Sometimes, months go by. But I do like it. I like to be able to get in touch with that part of myself.
But wouldn't you say that your walks in the woods are meditative?
Thank you. Yes, they are.
Yeah, I think we have this. We get into these very narrow definitions of what's meditation, and there are thousands of different kinds of meditation. And walking in the woods is a beautiful meditation. So what you're describing is bringing a meditative mind to the experience of walking in the woods, and that becomes your meditation.
Mm-hmm.
No reason why you have to sit in one place.
Okay, you said so.
That's one kind that's certainly popular, but by no means the only kind.
No, I think that is a good one for people. It's like, find your meditation practice, like, that works for you, right? And I think dancing is really important to me too. I'm like, in the boutique fitness world and the wellness world, we've talked about is like dance cardio. So it's kind of a cross of like good vibes and aerobics and great music in a very modern way. I love that. It really works for me. I like to follow choreography. It switches my brain off when I'm just doing a follow the leader thing. I love that. So that works for me too. Yeah. And I have like so many, like, I would say like 2 of my digital subscriptions that I've been very grateful for through the pandemic have, I've dance cardio with my old teachers just through a screen now. So I don't know. I really need that. That really sparks a lot of happiness for me.
I want to sort of elaborate on this question and on something that I've observed with you. How do you there's a lot of joy in you, a lot of appreciation of cooking and walking and being with people. How do you deal with really difficult situations when they come up? What are these the approaches you use? How do you get into this space of appreciating making that salad and finding that such a beautiful, consuming experience, as it should be? I mean, I know for myself, when I'm cooking and I'm just having a good time with it, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, I've got to make some food to get it on the table.
No, of course.
How do you move into that space when you, like everybody else, has been going through challenging times with the pandemic, with this political division? There's so much, chaos, confusion, anger, hurt in the world around us, and limitations in our own world. How are you dealing with these situations and using approaches and techniques to make it possible for you to not only survive, but to thrive in this situation?
I mean, thank you for seeing that in me. I'm really honored that you see that. I feel like it is that work in progress we were talking about earlier. No, I really try to be kind to myself, and it doesn't necessarily come naturally. So I have to kind of put things in place for myself to help with that. Sometimes it's really about like needing to vent a little bit, to be heard, to be listened to see in somebody's eyes that they get what I'm saying. They don't need to agree or disagree or dispense advice, but just to feel seen, I think helps me so much. So,
how do you get that? Who do you reach out to be heard?
My therapist in chief is my spouse, Tiff. Yes.
That's a lovely thing to say, right? Not everyone can say that. It's beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and her assistant, is my dog, Freddie Mercury, and, like, between the 2 of them, no, and I have I think, an open relationship with my family. I feel very lucky, and that's been a result of having really hard conversations over the years too, that we can really share hard stuff, share losses, share worries, with each other, and I'm so, so glad we've worked through all the stuff that we've worked through to have that for each other. I think these are really, well, we all know we've been using the word unprecedented a lot, right? These are unprecedented times. And I have no, I know that I need support systems. We started a thread with a bunch of friends since we all kind of scattered when the pandemic started. We started a thread, a text thread that every day there's a friend from a different part of the country chiming in about something. And that has been really wonderful for me too. I can't see some of the most beloved people in my life, but I hear from them, and it's just no pressure because we're all in this group thread. That's been incredible for me. So thank you, friends who are doing that and watching this.
I think this is so important. Everybody who's watching us is just do the experiment. Reach out to someone, whoever it is. The other day, I reached out to a member of our staff. I was going through confusion and distress and stuff in my personal life and my family life and my got a lot of stuff coming in with work. And just 2 minutes of exactly what you're saying, just speaking honestly about what's going on. It was almost like I could watch my mood turning around and feel it in my body. So I recommend this to everyone. Melisse is talking, whoever's in your household, a spouse, could be an animal, could be whatever, their family, friends, just do it and do the experiment and notice what happens. But when you speak with them with your heart open and sharing what you need to share. Take a chance. We're going to have to come to a close in a moment. There's a question that I want to just mention because we're going to come back to it in the weeks ahead. It's, are you working with or planning to work with the long haulers due to the physical and mental trauma they are still experiencing many weeks, months, and perhaps years with post-COVID symptoms? And then the questioner said, many are healthcare workers and cannot return to work, nor are they able to exercise. And we're going to come back to that. A lot of our work at the Center for Mind Body Medicine and the work that Melisse is helping us tell the world about is working with people who have experienced the trauma of COVID-19 as frontline healthcare workers or as people just living in this world where so much trauma and so much threat is abroad. So we will be coming back to that in the weeks ahead with our guests. My guest next week will be Elise Lonan, who is the Chief Content Officer, has been the Chief Content Officer for Goop, and is sort of a wonderful, like Melisse, one of those people who is trying to democratize the sphere of wellness. So be very interested in talking with her and understanding from her how she's been doing this and how she's been using mass media to do this as well. So please join us next week. And right now, we're going to do a minute or two of slow, deep, soft belly breathing to close this session. But before we do, Melisse, I just want to thank you. It's such a treat. Such a treat to be. Melisse said, "I'm going to ask you questions," but because she's a journalist and she's a consultant. But I thought, no, I really want to do more of asking you questions. It's great to hear you, and it's wonderful to have your voice and your person available to everyone who's watching these webinars.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity, Jim. I've really enjoyed it.
Great. So let's just sit for a minute. Just sitting comfortably in our chairs, breathing slowly and deeply, relaxing. And remember, it's always very important, not only at the beginning of a meeting or a new undertaking to take a little bit of time to meditate, but also when we come to a close with an activity, to sort of bring it to a close, let it be, and be open and fresh with that beginner's mind for whatever comes next. So breathe slowly and deeply, in through the nose and out through the mouth with our bellies soft and relaxed. Focusing on the breath, coming in through the nose and out through the mouth, on our bellies being soft and relaxed, and on the word soft as we breathe in, and belly as we breathe out. Feeling our whole bodies relax with each exhalation. If thoughts come, let them come, notice them, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. Just a couple more slow, deep breaths. Okay, slowly, gently, open your eyes. Let your attention come back in the room. So thank you again, Melisse. Thank you, everyone. See you all next week. Bye-bye.